I went into the hospital for emergency surgery. I didn't know I was going to have it. That's why it's called that. And I'll tell you what it was about in a minute. But when I got to the hospital, it was that I had just gotten back in from doing a tour across Kansas, and I was feeling sick to my stomach, which sometimes happens when I'm working Kansas, but I didn't think that this was the same thing. So I was talking to a good friend of mine, and at her encouragement, I went to the emergent care, and he said the doctor said, you need to go to the hospital. And I said, can I feed my cats first? And he said, yeah, so I did that. And then I drove myself to the emergency room thinking that I must have some terrible, virus or something, and they're going to give me, real strong antibiotics. And then they took one look at me and told me that I needed surgery. So I thought, well, can I call some people and let them know I'm here because they all think I'm in Kansas. So I called my family, and I'm at the hospital about to have emergency surgery. And they said, but you were just in Kansas. And I said, I know. That's what I was thinking. So anyway, if you remember, this was on March 1st, that terrible, terrible blizzard where they closed all the interstates and all the roads, and nobody could get to me. So I'm alone in the hospital, and I'm on the gurney, and they're pushing me around and doing different tests on me and stuff. And they told me I had to go to surgery, and I they put that balloon thing on my head to cover up my hair, and I had on a really interesting patterned smock, and then I had a different interesting patterned blanket over the top of that. And they left me in the room alone, and I'm just kind of looking at myself. But I started to get really nervous because, I'm not really sure what's wrong with me at that point, and anything. So the doctor came in and talked to me, and he told me what was going on, and he said, it's a very good thing that you came in, he said, because you're about 12 hours away from being dead. So that really shored me up. I felt much better after his visit. So I thought to myself, Julie, you're always telling people to turn your thinking around. Turn it around. You can turn it around if you think positively. And when I really get stuck, I try to think of some kind of a metaphor to get me through it. So I thought, find yourself a metaphor. So as I'm looking at me here and the balloon on my head and the different colors and stuff, and they keep pushing me around, I thought, I kind of feel like a float in a parade. So that's going to be my metaphor. I'm going to be a float in the parade. So when the nurse came to take me to the emergency room, I told her, I said, look, I'm pretending to be a float in a parade. And she looked at me like perhaps the fever had taken over. And I said, could you push me once around the ward before you take me to the OR? Because I would like to wave to everyone. So because I'm now like 11 hours away from being dead, I guess she thought she might as well give me my last wish, so she took me around. And I waved to everyone. And they take me in the elevator down to the basement where they have the OR. And they roll me in there, and the anesthesiologist comes up to me, and he has on, the cap and the mask and the whole outfit. And I see this much of his face. And he leans over to me, and he said, so, Julie, I understand you're being a float in a parade. And I looked up at him and I said, well, so much for that HIPAA thing. And he looked down at me and he said, none of this surprises me at all about you, really. And I said, well, why would you say that? And he goes, you don't recognize me? I can only see his eyes. I am, 10 and a half hours away from dying. I'm being a float in a parade. My brain is pretty busy right now. No, I said, I'm sorry, I don't recognize you. And he goes, well, I took a class from you 20 years ago, he said. And I said, well, did you enjoy the class? And as he's putting the anesthetic on me, he said, it's the only B I ever got. The entire operating room erupted into laughter. Surgeon's standing there, everybody's standing around as he does that. And then the last thing I remember going under is, who forgot the scalpels? Somebody run to the kitchen. That's what I heard. Now, I'm telling you that's the best time they ever had in that operating room. All because I started out as a float in a parade. In other words, what I'm saying to you is when you set up an environment to be a good humor environment, it just spreads like that. Everybody thinks they're funny. So anyway, I came out of surgery, and and they, were checking me and asked me how I was. I was good, and they said everything went really well. And they said that the nurse said to me, well, I've got to do one more thing, and then I'll take you back to your room. And I said, okay. So I didn't know what the thing was at the time, but it turns out that she was told to call back up to the ward to let them know when I was coming up. So when the elevator doors opened, here were rows of people on each side of the elevators. Nurses, patients, one janitor with a really confused look on his face, applauding and throwing candy over the top of me as they rolled me back to my room.